You have to learn from the things you do that don't work. Be willing to pivot when something comes your way that looks like it can be something good for you, and follow through. You have to be consistent. It's a mindset. You have to set your mind that you're going to succeed and keep moving in the direction that is going to be successful for you.
Welcome to the 2% Factor podcast, where we explore where small things make a massive difference in someone's journey and their personal and professional story. Today, we're joined by Dan McIntyre, a distinguished luxury home builder based in the Phoenix, Scottsdale area with over 25 years of expertise. Dan's crafted quality custom homes in the Valley for many years, earning acclaim for his dedication to quality craftsmanship, timeless design, and built long-term relationships with a number of different folks in the Valley over the years. Join us as we talk with Dan about his journey, his shift into custom home building, and what that's been like in the Phoenix area as it's exploded with population and more folks coming to the area. So welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Love being here.
It's great to have you. I'm actually really excited. We talked about this to talk about your story. I think there's a lot of people that are interested in, home building, custom home buildings. I think a lot of people have a dream ultimately to get to a place where you could build a custom home.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of folks interested in the career, a lot of folks in real estate that may want to make that transition, and investors that are always, interested. So there's so many different areas for us to cover. I'm excited to have you on today.
Excited. Thank you.
So let's kind of start with where you started, because that wasn't in home building, right? That was back college, military. Walk us through a little bit of that as we transition in.
Out of high school, I went straight into the military. My dad said all guys have to join the military, so I did. I was only there for 4 years.
I don't know if we talked about this. My dad was in the military as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. What branch was he in?
Navy.
Navy, okay. I was in the Army.
Okay.
And, it was a great experience. During that time, there were no conflicts going on, so I think the biggest thing that happened during that time period was Grenada, and it lasted all of 3.5 hours or something. So, but it was a great experience. You learn a lot of discipline, and it's really interesting because you get a cross section of society with people in the service. So I think you learn a lot about relationships and how to finish things. It's all very disciplined. You get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, start PT, and your day goes until you hit your cot that nighttime. So it was a great experience.
I know what you mean about the military. I watched. It was my dad. My dad, he would run every morning to work 14 miles, which to the average person now that seems crazy, right? But he would.
It does.
He would,
We could get up and run 20 miles a morning full ruck. Yeah, I don't run anymore. Let's put
yeah,
it that way.
yeah. Well, your knees are probably killing you at this point.
I had enough running back then.
So I do agree with you, and I have friends who have kids in the military now, and I grew up as a military kid on Navy bases, and living, in that environment, you saw a lot of discipline, and I saw him run. Instead of drive to work, he chose to run, and then he'd go to work and then do PT there, right? Because that's how he started his day. And then my stepdad, I'd see the same thing and the same mindset of disciplinary behavior that he took from being a submarine commander and navigator to in even post-retired life, in the way that he approached everything in such a consistent, disciplined way. It really made an impact on me, and kind of seeing how they've shaped their lives from those early learnings.
It's interesting you say that, because that's what successful people do. They're consistent every day. That's what they do. So it is you have a set schedule and you follow the same thing every day. So it's very consistent.
They say boring is cool now. Well, at least I say that.
I always told my daughter, if you're bored, only boring people are bored. There's always something to do.
There is always something to do. And I feel like nowadays everybody's drawn to the chaos, and in terms of like, even when you look at life in general and social media, it's a ton of distractions. And so I think kind of bringing that back to center to me, and trying to focus on the things that maybe the classic people consider boring, which is discipline and consistency and things like that. I mean, honestly, this podcast is not for somebody who wants to see chaos. You want to break down, it's for somebody who actually cares to get into the deeper meanings of why people do the things they do, why they choose their decisions, and how that ultimately impacted their life. And you have to be a person who cares about that to get into it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think today's kids and even my kids, they grew up on social media. So they're so tied to it that I think they lose track of what really makes people successful is consistency and going out and doing stuff and not they sit around and they're tied to the telephone. They're on it all day long. They got to see everything that gets posted. They got to be a part of all it. They're all clicking back and forth with each other. People are not talking to each other any longer. Face to face. There's no longer their dialogue comes from text messages.
Oh yeah, it totally, and it changes how people communicate now too.
It does.
And that has worked its way into B2B, how B2B communication takes place, how business people communicate. Where do you text? Where is it a video? Where is it a phone call? Where is it an email? Right? Everything's evolving, which I think is exciting at the same time.
It is. It's exciting. I mean, I told my father, the grandkids are not going to call you. If you want to talk to them, text them. They will text you back. So it's a big learning curve for older people to do that. He's in his 80s. He's texting all these kids and stuff, but it's just a different. Every generation has something different, and we all say, "How's that generation going to make it?" But they do. They do.
We figure it out and persevere. Okay, so what happened after like the military?
I just went to college after the military. Went to the University of Oklahoma, went to get a biology degree. Thought I was going to go to medical school.
That's an interesting similar background. I was pre-med.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we've never talked about this, but yeah, I was pre-med for 2 years, and then my junior year switched over to business and said, I think that's really where I want to be. So you started pre-med, and
No, I stayed. I went all the way through for a
you
biology
went all the way
degree.
through and graduated with a biology degree.
Correct.
What ended up evolving from there for you?
I moved to Arizona and was taking the MCATs and going through that process and thought I was going to go to medical school. And I'd already done construction when I was a kid. So I started, had a little bit of money saved, started buying some little properties to flip, and I had a cousin here who married a orthopedic surgeon who lived here in town, and then I, for a while, thought I was going to go into practice with him, and he changed directions, mainly because of insurance companies and how the medical profession started changing. He started concentrating on his bioengineering business. And he said to me, if I were you, I'd keep doing the building. You're being successful at it. So I just kept going on building.
Like, what were some of those early steps you took in order to get into home building?
It's interesting. I hooked up with a group here. I just started buying some properties and doing flips and stuff, but I hooked up with a group here out of Canada, and they needed a builder. They were buying a bunch of properties that were coming from the ROC, or Resolution Trust Corporation, RTC. The properties that were coming from the RTC, which were part of the properties that had gone back had been foreclosed on when all the S&Ls crashed. So the government opened up a thing called the RTC, and they were buying those properties and developing them. So I started out doing high-end condo projects, and I did that for years, and kind of just flipped into custom homes after that.
So for you, I mean, that was really a 2% factor moment where you were going down the medical school likely path and shaping all that, and then making this big shift in deciding to continue to remodel homes, flip homes, and stay on the construction path.
Yeah, I think you just have to be willing to accept the opportunities that come your way and move on them. You can't. A lot of people go to college and don't unless they're going into law school or medical school and they're already in there. They'll change. You change. You got to be willing to look and see what opens up to you and move towards it.
The funny thing is, knowing you, I could also see you being a doctor, though.
I probably could have.
I think you chose the right path.
I have a
So,
buddy who's a orthopedic surgeon, and I just tell him he's a glorified construction worker. They're doing the same thing. They're sawing, they're using hammers. He's just doing the same thing. You're just glorified construction worker.
you're just cutting different things.
That's right.
Let me ask you a question. Did you know back when you were doing home flipping, remodeling, and just really getting started in your 20s, did you have a vision to become a high-end luxury home builder, or like what was your mindset at that point?
I knew that I wanted to move up to bigger and better houses. My mindset is always to build the best house I can build and use the best products that you can use because there are people who will buy the best stuff. And there's a market for everybody. My market is just high-end luxury homes. So yes, I always moved that direction. I was always trying to move into better houses, or what I call better houses, more luxury homes.
Yeah, so you had a goal and a desire to work yourself up into that space, and so you were figuring that out along the way. I only bring that up because I think it's important. I think a lot of people look at people that are successful and come up with their own reasons on how they got there. It's not a coincidence. You were driving towards that goal. You were intending to figure out how to work yourself towards that high-end luxury market, quality goods, building with intention, if you will.
Yeah, I would drive through those neighborhoods and look at those houses and say, okay, that's where I'm headed. That's what I'm going to do. It took a while to get there. It takes a long time to get people to say, okay, I'm giving you millions of dollars to build a house for me. They're large investments. For most people, it's the most expensive thing they will ever pay for. So it takes a lot of trust. And I tell people, look, if you and I don't feel like we're, flowing together, even if my accent bothers you, when I'm talking, if that bothers you, we probably shouldn't do business together because these are intimate relationships. So it took a long time to get people to trust me to build that style of house for them and to pay for it, to be willing to risk their money for me to do that.
That makes a lot of sense. It is incredibly personal, and you're right. Being on the other side of it, as I've worked with you, it does take a lot of trust.
It takes a lot of trust. Yeah.
I love that you brought that up because anyone that's listening that's thinking about really honestly the selling process, whatever business you're in, and you're in the business of selling the idea of working with you to build, a really important investment for not only you, but for your family. And, and, and it doesn't get more personal than that. You're in every aspect of their personal life. So the fact that you brought up trust, I think you'd agree it's the most important thing in the process.
It is the most important thing. It's really interesting because, you're dealing with, for the most part, a family. They each have different ideas of how they want to do things. So it's you're kind of meshing them together and getting the best out of both of them to try to finalize what both of them want to see.
Let's talk about this for a second. Again, this is a conversation we've never had, and I'm not sure why. How do you read the room on that? Because I sense that you're really good at that. How do you read the room on those dynamics on the relationship? Which, for those listening that aren't in home building, even if you're in tech or any other industry, reading the room and understanding your audience and connecting with that audience is critical. You do that when you're working with a client and extended family members through that process. How does that happen for you?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I listen first of all. I pay attention to what each person is saying, and then I kind of help direct them along the way based off of what they're saying. And for instance, I'll have people say they want a specific part of their house to look a specific way or something, and I will say, great, this is your house, but I am always looking at houses for what happens down the road. If you are going to sell it, if you're going to move, if you get transferred, what is going to give you the best opportunity to sell this house to the most people? So I listen to what they want. I start drawing their houses, and I try to incorporate what each of the people want. So I think that's where it really flows, is mostly in paying attention to what they're looking for, paying attention to their personalities, and I really don't interject until I kind of hear their whole, what they like, what they want, and then try to steer them to what is best for resale value in case they are going to sell that house someday.
I love these conversations because no matter what industry you're in, I'll use tech, and that's in my world, right? Compared to home building, the fundamentals are the same.
They are.
The fact that you need to understand who you're talking to, what their drivers are, what their motivations are, what their nuances are, the stakeholder buying process in terms of who is going to decide what,
Right.
and and how that decision will occur, and then listening, learning, and then I think also respecting, right? I think that's a natural part of it too, because you care enough to understand what they're interested in because you respect their lives, right? And you also have to adapt. I mean, you're very adaptable. You have to go into all these different situations and read the room and then adapt to what that is in order to move down the path.
Definitely. Adaptation is probably the biggest thing that you have to do, because you got to listen, but then adapting to what they like, what they want, what their personalities are like. I think that really is the biggest thing that you can do, is make sure that you're ready to move in different directions and stuff, and paying attention to. You got to really pay attention to what they say, because sometimes they don't know what they want, but they're giving you clues as they go along.
I love it. And I think a lot of times, again, applies for any industry. People will say you need to listen, and that's great. What do you do with that information? How do you apply it? How do you adapt? How do you value it? I also think is a part that a lot of times people think they're doing and they're really not. I think a lot of times people just collect information about their stakeholders and believe they're doing something with it, but they're actually not applying it. But I can go down that rabbit hole and nerd out because I just think it's a lost art, if you will, to genuinely seek out to understand, care about that, and then go all the way down the path to applying where you can help improve their life, their situation, through your process. Tell me a little bit about, let's get into some of the homes that you're building. And I know, a few of them. But give a little bit of a profile of the price points, the style, those types of things.
It's really interesting. I would say probably 8 to 10 years ago, especially when I was building a spec house, which I do at least one a year, sometimes two. So it's really interesting because the price point, what I used to see my exit point back 8 to 10 years ago, the exit point on a spec house was $3.5 million for me. That exit point now has moved up more to about $7 or $8 million. So the market has changed significantly. The prices, of course, are higher in terms of product, what you're putting into the houses, what you're buying, materials. But the people that are buying these houses now, their market price is much higher than it used to be. Currently, I have 9 houses I'm building currently. One of them is a spec, which I have already sold now. The rest of them are homeowner houses, and they range from $30 million down to roughly about 7.
Those are unbelievable price points, and I know those are price points that are real in this area.
Yeah, they're real in this area. The price point has changed significantly.
Well, I think the buying group has changed too, right? We've talked about there's been so many people that have moved to this area, and the income and the jobs and the careers and the different professions that they're in, I'm sure has evolved. What does that look like for you when you look at, let's say, the last 20 years? You moved here in the early 90s, right? And now in 2024, over that 30 years, how has the profile of the buyer and what type of jobs they had changed from those days to now?
In the early days, it was older people pushing the market, doctors, lawyers. Today, I'd say it's the younger groups pushing the market. They're 30 years old to 45. That's what pushes the luxury market now. And it's interesting because the jobs have changed. You're seeing a lot of tech people. I see a lot of people who have started their own businesses and have been successful. They're buying these houses. So that it has significantly changed not only in the dollar amount, but in the people who are buying the houses. Like I said early on, it was probably 50-year-olds. Now it's 35-year-old is probably the average that is picking up these $7 to $10 million houses.
Give us an idea on like what type of jobs, like what are some examples without naming names of people, but what are some of the jobs that some of those folks have?
Yeah, I have a couple tech people. I have a couple lawyers. I have a guy who started a business who buys medical practices. He's been very successful at doing that. I have a guy who owns a salvage yard that he started when he was young. So yeah, it's just a wide variety of people. It's really interesting to me when you look at the buyers, the amount of house that they can purchase now, their ages, and how they got there. I talk to all of them about their businesses because I find it very interesting. Last year I sold a really big house to a gentleman who started as a construction worker and ended up owning a lumber factory. So, I think that it's really interesting on their stories because you get an idea of how people, every one of them, have shifted what they thought they were doing to what they ended up doing and what they became successful at.
What are some of the common threads to success for these people that you've talked to that are your customers, these folks that are buying multi-million-dollar homes? What are some of the common threads you've seen when you hear their stories to their success?
I think the biggest is consistency. They get up in the morning, they get up early, they get going, they have a list of things that they do every single day. They tackle their main things the same way every day, and they're just consistent. I don't think anyone would look at them or talk to them and find them more than ordinary. in terms of their life, but they are consistent every day. They're willing to get up and do things that other people don't do every day, which is be consistent.
Our very first podcast we did with Joe Terry, ex-CEO of Corporate Visions and current CEO of Culture Partners, he talked exactly about that grit that it takes to do the things that people don't want to do, and he had a very similar statement about that. So it's terrific, and I love that you're asking people their story. And it's interesting. Scottsdale is bringing a lot of millionaires to the area. They're attracted to the golf, to the weather, to the restaurants, and all the things that you can do, and the fact that you have more flexibility to live in different places that you want to live now. I think often Scottsdale starts as a second home area for people with money, or maybe a vacation area, and then they come and realize they want to live here. So
Yeah, it's moved just since I've been here in '92. I mean, this community has changed a lot, and it's lifestyle. People are coming for the lifestyle that we have here. We have fantastic restaurants. We have fantastic golf. If people are into nightlife, there's great places to go. It's just a lifestyle change for people. And it's really interesting because you see, watching where people come from is also very interesting. What parts of the country they're moving here from. I think it's just a whole lifestyle change for people, and they enjoy it. And people are active here. You're always out and about, going places. This is probably one of the best restaurant scenes in the country.
and it's so underknown. It's so underknown. I think nobody thinks about Phoenix, Scottsdale area as a restaurant scene, if you will. And you know what? I'd love to hear what you think about this. I've got a theory. My theory is that certainly growth drives more hospitality, and that's happening. But what I've also seen here that I haven't seen in other places, and I've traveled in a lot of places around the world, is in this particular location, you'll find business owners of hospitality brands that come here and start one of their restaurants here because they also live here or want to live here part-time or move here.
Right, yeah.
So there's a pizza place from Omaha, Nebraska. Like, why are they here out of all places in terms of their second location? And it's because the owner wanted to live here part-time.
I don't think they want to live here, but the scene here, especially for restaurants and hospitality, that's what this valley was built on. The valley was built on hospitality, businesses, real estate, but there are several national chains who have started their stuff in this Phoenix, Scottsdale area. That's where they started. So the restaurant scene, people just, I think when you visit other parts of the country, I think this area is just a place where a lot of people go out a lot. They have great restaurants. The ambiance is great. The people are generally very friendly here. So yeah, I think it just drives it, and people get here. They come and visit. I know lots of people have just come to visit here for vacation and then said, "I'm moving here."
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd say that was probably my story. I had been here over the years many times, and then realized it's a great place to live. It's funny you say that, though. I have family here right now visiting, and last night my sister said to me, "It's really hard to cook here because you could go to another great restaurant every night."
Every night. There are so fantastic chefs here. Yeah, the restaurant scene is fantastic here. I love it. I say there's no better place in the country to be than here in this area during the winter time.
I agree with you. I mean, October to April or October to May, it's just incredible. It's incredible, yeah. If you're in the business of luxury home building with the dynamics of a growth area like this, that's a great place to be. How do you consider relationships as a part of the formula for you in terms of your success when you look at 30 years of doing this? Where do relationships play a role in you establishing your brand and building your business?
Relationships are the entire business. I mean, I don't advertise. So getting relationships and having relationships, doing building a house for someone and then them telling all their friends. The realtors in the valley, I have great relationships with all the realtors. They find me lots of properties. So yeah, I think the relationships are the big deal. I mean, if you can build a house for someone and go through that personal journey with them, which is a very intimate journey, and they had a great experience, they're going to tell everybody. They will tell the same as they will tell everyone if they didn't have a great experience. They'll tell everyone they had a great experience, and that's where my business thrives is having good experiences with customers. That has changed everything for me. That has made it. I turn down projects a lot. Especially if we meet and there's just something that it may not be them, it may not be me, something doesn't mesh. So I feel like the relationships that you make in this business or any business and the relationships that you continue to have, I'm friends with almost every person that I built the house for. I've become great friends with them. I do stuff with them. I go to dinner with them. I think that's really important, and that is where the difference in my business and other businesses that you look at, or whatever you look at, but that's the difference in my journey is really, first off, you got to do what you say you're going to do. You got to produce what you say you can produce, and I have to tell you that the taking people through houses that I've already built, and those customers let me bring people in their houses, has really changed the way that I do business. It's really made it successful for me.
So Dan, I agree. I mean, to me, relationships have made a massive impact in my life as well. And when I look, and not only now, I mean, now we can tell stories because we have a lot of relationships, right? But when you look back to when you were younger, they played a role even to me getting started. Like my first job out of college happened because the person that I met came up to a marketing society meeting, like an alumni event, where she was invited back to my college where I went to school at Western Washington University. Shout out to Bellingham. I'm sure nobody's heard of it. But anyway, at Western, I was in the marketing club, and it's just one of those things that you want to meet more people, you want to network, you want to invest in your future career. And as a business major and a marketing minor, that's what I did. And I knew joining that club would introduce me to people. She ended up coming up to one of the events, and I was in it for 1 year, and then I became president the next year. And through that, I got to meet her more than just her coming into the class. She ended up being the person who connected me with her sales manager at a tech company that normally they didn't hire college graduates. All the people around me were 40. And the only reason I got that job is because I built that relationship with someone who came to my school at that time, right? And so the importance of all those little steps, saying yes to being a part, going out and being a part of a club, getting into more networking events, meeting people, and creating doors that open,
Yeah.
Through that.
Well, isn't success where opportunity meets hard work? Right? You prepped yourself. You did the things that you were looking. You knew meeting people was important, and that's where they introduce you to other people. I mean, you just have to be prepared to accept and to act on what looks like an opportunity for you.
I think that's absolutely spot on, and I think it's you're right. It's not just one thing. I'm a big believer in micro steps, right? Micro steps to success, because it was understanding the importance of people, understanding the importance of relationships, putting yourself in a position to meet them, taking a risk to be in a leadership role, and having to go through that process, which is also unnerving. And
Most people don't understand when it happens or know how to act on it when it does happen. And that's where you have to be. You have to be able to act on it. You have to follow through. You have to be consistent. You have to keep following through. It just kind of all ties together. And And relationships, again, to me, are everything. I mean, the people that you meet, the experiences you take from it, the people that they introduce you to. Yeah, I think that's a key to success, is realizing which of those moments are important.
Your reputation is absolutely stellar in town, and it takes years to build that up, and it takes a minute to tear it down.
It takes a minute.
When you look at your journey, I mean, you're at a time in your life where you can look back at success and choices you've made and pivots you've had to make for business, economic downturns, pandemics. There's been a lot of things that have occurred when you look at a career such as yours. What were a couple of the key 2% factor moments for you when you say, if I wouldn't have done this, thought about it this way, made this choice, took this risk? What are some of those key ones that pop, to the top of your mind for your career and your life?
Well, you're right, because economic downturns and stuff is really big in the real estate business. I I'd say nothing just as a specific moment, but I think that you have to be willing to pivot when you see something change. You have to be willing to take a chance, right? I think people fear failure, and you have to be willing to fail to succeed. So, if I look at the market, for instance, and it's changing, which it's done several times since '92, since I've started building here, there are times where in 2008 the market crashed, right? At that crash, I was in the middle of four $5 million spec houses that I owned in cash.
Which today is a $10 to $13 million house.
That's right. Yeah, it would have been easy to stop at that point. It would have been easy to say, I'm not going to do this. I sold them all. I didn't get what I wanted for all of them. So, I took a hit. I took a hit in the market, but you have to jump back on and be willing to go again. You have to learn from your mistakes. You have to be able to not repeat the same thing that you did before. So I really, where I'm at in my life right now, I don't find these things as risks. For instance, if I take on a $10 million spec house and I'm putting out $8 million of my money to build a house and hope that I'm going to turn it in the end, I think if you do, you always follow a formula that you're doing the best you can do, and you make them the best that you can make them, people are going to buy them. People are going to buy them, so I don't consider them risks anymore, where other people would consider it a risk. They consider it a financial risk. I actually do not.
When did that change for you?
I would say that changed for me probably in 2012, because I had been very successful prior to that, and then the market crashes. And if you're in the middle of the crash, if you're on the top end of the crash, great. If you're in the middle of it when it goes down and you're holding properties, it can hurt you. It can hurt you. So a lot of people would say, I'm done. I'm not doing it again. You have to jump right back on and start going again. You have to keep moving. You can't stay still. You got to keep going and learning from what you did before. So watching indicators in the market is really important. But there are certain areas of town where I don't think the market really affects. I don't think the market really affects certain areas. And that's why I mostly build there in certain areas.
Yeah, just like anything, some things are a little more recession-proof-ish.
They are.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nothing's perfect, but yeah. I love that you just broke that down and told that story, because there's a lot there. In particular, going through the crash, it's interesting that just to shine a light on this for a minute, because these are the things that I genuinely appreciate and care about, is when I asked you when that changed for you, it's not a coincidence that it changed for you after the hardship you went through with the downturn in the market in '07, '08 to 12. Really, because kind of 12 and 13 is where things emerged, started kind of crawling back out, if you will. And so when you look at any hardship you've had in your life. We particularly had, a tough time or two in my business as well over the many years. And when you're in it, trying to stay focused and calm and understand that you're going to find your way through it, even if you don't know your way through it. And then understanding that there's going to be tremendous value on the other side of it, even though it doesn't feel that way. And then when you get on the other side of it, it is absolutely true. And that's the story you just told.
Yeah, it's most people will stop. There's where that's ties back to consistency, right? You have to learn from the things you do that don't work. Be willing to pivot when something comes your way that, that looks like it can be something good for you, and follow through. You have to be consistent. So, yeah, I think that is really the difference for me is it's a mindset. It's a mindset. You have to set your mind that you're going to succeed and keep moving in the direction that is going to be successful for you.
I agree. And I remember vividly a couple of those gut wrenching moments, those mornings you wake up and you know you have people that are counting on you, whether that's family, payroll, responsibilities, and the fact that you've got to persevere and push through, it is something that you grow from. And it's something that you maybe even don't know you have in you while you're doing it. And then you figure out what you're really made of through it. So I really relate to some of those key moments from a business perspective that were 2% factor moments probably for both of us.
People who are successful surround themselves with successful people or smart people. I don't mind having someone who is in my business, works under me, who's smarter than I am. I mean, that is helpful. You got to make sure you get the right people around you. It's important to hire the right people, to make sure that those people feel like they have a path to success also, because they sometimes they drag you along. I always tell younger people, look, if you're the person in charge, no one's coming to save you. Okay, you can't fold up, you can't fold tent. No one's coming to save you. It's you. You're there by yourself. No one's going to give you attaboys all the time. You have to be self-driven. You have to be self-driven.
And you know what? I'll say this because for my staff at 2Win, for me they inspire me too. You see them push through something really hard and or get creative and get gritty and it is I think inspirational for the people around when you see the staff digging in and really going for it. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, you brought this up a little earlier in the conversation, but I want to go back to it for a minute. You talked about the people that you've met, that you build homes for, that are extremely successful, and some of the traits that they have that have got them there. And one of the things that you said that was key was they're not afraid to fail, and you can't be afraid to fail. Why do you think people fear failure, in your opinion, from what you've seen?
I think they're just, some people are afraid of success, right? That's part of it too. Some people are afraid to be successful because things start going good and they self-sabotage themselves. So, but I think people are afraid of failure because number one, it hurts. It hurts to fail, right? It can cause emotional distress. It can cause financial distress. Failure is hard, but if you do fail, that's how you succeed. You learn to move on to the next step and do things differently. Learn from what you did. Learn from what happened that made you fail, whether it was your responsibility that you failed or it was outside controls like the market. I think you just have to persevere. You have to keep moving along. And I think it hurts so bad to fail that once people do fail, they stop. That's it. They move into what is a comfort zone for them. I'll go get a job that that is a 9 to 5 that someone's paying me, and I have comfort in that, because again, no one's coming to save you, no one's coming to rescue you. If you own a business, you have to keep moving forward. You have to surround yourself with people who you're going to help them move forward too. So I think the real deal is that people, it hurts. It hurts to fail. It's like breaking up in a relationship. It hurts to do that. And those relationships can be meaningful in the rest of your life because you learn from them, but people don't want to. People don't want to fail. It hurts too much.
I think when people take a risk, you're forcing yourself to have to also understand that you're going to have to pivot. And what I mean by that is you take a business decision, like you're going to take a risk, you're going to, invest in a new area, you're going to double to scale, you're going to hire more people than you have necessarily projects for, because you're trying to build up for interest rates coming down and hopefully 25, whatever the story is in what industry you're in. I think when you take a risk and you put yourself out there, you're forcing yourself to be in a position where you do need to pivot. You've got to adapt through it because you've gone all in. And when you go all in, there's something to that. There's risk.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Again, I don't see what I do as much risk because I have learned a lot along the way that for instance, buying properties. When I'm going to buy a property and build a house on it, I only now look for prime properties. I only look for the best properties so that I know so it doesn't feel as risky to me as it did when I was younger. When I was younger, I made different decisions. I've grown from the experiences, from the failures, from the pain. I've grown from that to a place where I feel comfortable and I don't consider it risky any longer.
What's a prime property to a luxury experienced custom home builder?
It's a property that everyone would want to own. It's a property where you're expanding your market base. And in other words, when I finish with it, there's going to be a lot of people go, man, I'd love to have that property. Versus, for instance, if you buy a property on close to a busy street, those I don't see as prime properties because you're low in your market. There's a lot of people who say, I don't want to hear the traffic noise. So I really look for the ones that everyone would say, I'd love to live in that place.
Dan, I feel like this is just my sense in our time here this morning and knowing you. I feel like some of the keys to your success are your core values. Is that true? What do you want to share on that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just about the things you learn when you're young, how you keep moving on, what you do, how you take advantage of the opportunities that you have. Yeah, I think it's kind of innate for some people.
What are some of the things? What are some of the things that you're seeing now as a luxury home builder, and doing custom and spec? What are some of the trends you're seeing in the new homes that are being built? What are some of the things that people want, they have to have? And again, I'll caveat this. This is the upper end luxury market. But I'm curious, what has changed in that, and what are some of the new trends that are out there?
Well, it's interesting in the luxury market because every child has to have their own bedroom, right? And their own ensuite bathrooms. And when I was a kid, I shared a bedroom with two brothers, and a bathroom with two brothers and two sisters. So the parents want their kids to be raised differently, right? They each have their own rooms. They each have their own bathrooms. They have personal spaces for each of them. And I think in some of the other items I'm seeing is that, these we're putting in cold plunges in the houses. They're all getting cold plunges and saunas in them and steam units, and that has changed over the years. Yeah, it's just kind of, it's more, you're just, when you say luxury, you're just moving more towards what people believe are luxury items. We're putting, almost every one of those houses will get, uh, if they are golfers, they'll get greens in the backyard, areas to chip and putt, and just more. We've got houses that have golf simulators in them. That's a big move for people. So the theaters have been around for a long time. I don't think we're doing nearly as many theaters as we used to do because people are using that space differently. They'll use it as a game room that has, big screen TVs in it, but not just as a sit-down theater any longer. That has moved out of the luxury market for the most part. People consider it wasted space.
That makes sense, actually. And yeah, I haven't heard somebody say that yet, but that makes a lot of sense. And especially TVs have gotten bigger, so they'll use it as more of a multi-purpose room as compared to just a place to go watch a movie.
Yeah, we'll put pool tables in there and pinball machines, and just it's moved into more of a what you said, a multi-use rooms than just theaters. We've torn theaters out of houses and done more of that, made them more multi-use rooms.
I'm curious on the cold plunge. Have you tried it?
Oh yes, it's amazing.
It is amazing. I got into it about a year ago.
It's amazing how quickly you recover when you have a cold plunge. So that's a big one. Everyone wants a cold plunge right now, whether you can fit it into the design of their house if the lots are big enough and
And what are you seeing, just to stick on cold plunges for a minute, because I'm interested in this, is how often are you seeing a cold plunge request for a custom home being in ground versus the above ground, and where are they typically located?
we're not really doing what you would call in ground on any of them. Most of them look like a bathtub. I see a lot of people ask for them, especially, when I'm doing in the spec market, I try to put them in spec houses everywhere. And when I do that, I'll put a sauna next to them because that combination of sauna cold plunge is really important for recovery.
Something we will continue to see evolve, and it'll be interesting to see what's next, right? Yeah, I mean, there's so many things you didn't see coming, and then it's going to evolve from here. I mean, I think COVID changed a lot of things too, where people want, if they can, they want their home to be a retreat and a space that they can do all the things in if they're not, for an example, able to leave.
And that's a great point because people were stuck at home. And now you kind of, you start realizing the things that you really want in your home when you have to stay there all the time and you can't go outside.
Something we ask every guest, and I'm excited to ask you this question. When you look back at your 22-year-old self, right, that moment when you were that age and at that stage in your life, what advice would you give to 22-year-old Dan McIntyre?
Gosh, I would say pay attention to opportunities that are in front of you. Pay attention to things that happen that could be an opportunity that you did not, in that age period that I did not take advantage of. I did not, it was harder to realize when there were opportunities. It was harder to recognize a great opportunity back then.
It's one thing to go after something. It's another thing to recognize that there's an opportunity to go after, and and then executing from there. But so many opportunities pass people by because they're not, their senses aren't there to see it around them. Yeah.
That's a big one. I think that's a big one. Being able to recognize when it's an opportunity.
I love it. I appreciate you and thank you for joining the podcast. I think you shared some tremendous insights and things for people to learn from as they continue to navigate their lives and their professional careers. And thank you for sharing everything you shared today. Is there anything that you would like to promote in terms of how can people get a hold of you? Let's say they want to build a fancy custom luxury home in the Scottsdale, Phoenix area. How can people find you?
Well, just get on. You can get on my website at McIntyre Development, and I'm on Instagram too. I'm not real great at doing the Instagram posts like I should, but that's McIntyre Development also. And there's links to get a hold of me from there.
Well, thank you, Dan. I appreciate you joining today. Wonderful experience. Thanks for joining the 2% Factor podcast.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Well, thank you all for watching. Please like, subscribe, comment, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere where you watch your podcast. Thank you for joining the 2% Factor podcast. We'll see you on the next one.